Test 1 2 3. Test 1 2 3.
And we're back, and welcome to the Hamilton Utilities Corporation shareholder. And we're here on June 8th, 2023, Deputy Mayor Cameron Kretsch, and we will just go through again the same thing. In the council chamber is Councillors Tom Jackson, Tammy Huang, Matt Francis, Brad Clark, Craig Kassar, and Ted McMeekin, and joining us virtually, Councillors Esther Pauls, Jean-Paul Danko, Alex Wilson, Narinder Nan, Maureen Wilson, and Mark Taddison, and that's Councillor Esther Pauls from Ward 7. I want to make sure I get that right this time. So welcome to the meeting. Calling it to order, we have quorum. A further reminder that all electronic devices are to be switched to a non-audible function during our committee meetings. That includes if it makes loud noises of any kind, including vibrations. Item number 1 on our agenda is the approval of the agenda. And before I get to that, just want to let you know sort of what the roadmap is. We have 2 activities today. Activity number 1 is a presentation from HACO. Then they will briefly introduce the Electra folks. Sorry, HUC, I apologize, from HUC, Hamilton Utilities Corporation. Same people, different presentation. And so, and then Electra, and then shareholder resolutions and adjournment. So you have a path for what the meeting will look like. Clerk McRae, are there any changes to the agenda?
No, Deputy Mayor, there are no changes.
Great, can I have a mover and seconder to approve it? Councillor Huang, seconded by Councillor Kassar. Any discussion on today's agenda? Not seeing any. We'll go to the electronic vote. For folks who are voting electronically, make sure you're in the HUC. I see the affirmative from Councillors McMeekin, Councillor Taddison, Councillor Danko, and Mayor Horvath, and Councillor Clark. Are all in favor. And Councillor Pauls is also in favor. And that carried 14-0. And so we're on to item number 2 on the agenda, any declarations of interest. Does anyone have a declaration of interest today? Not seeing any hands darting into the air, we'll proceed briskly to number 3 on our agenda, which is the approval of the minutes of the previous meeting. So can I have somebody who was at the previous meeting of April 5th, 2023? So it's Councillor Huang is the mover, seconded by Councillor Danko. Any questions on the previous meeting's minutes? Not seeing any, we'll go to the vote. Also in favor are Councillor Mark Taddison, Councillor Ted McMeekin, Mayor Horvath. Councillor Jackson is also in favor. That makes everybody 14-0. And now we're on to item number 5, and this is where the presentations start. So this is the Hamilton Utilities Corporation, or HUC, annual general meeting. I'd like to call upon the same folks who were here before, moments ago. Jeffrey Cowan, the President and CEO of the Hamilton Utilities Corporation, and Lori Tugman, Chairman of the Board for the Hamilton Utilities Corporation, to provide the presentation for item 5.1. Take it away at your leisure, and we'll have questions at the conclusion of your presentation.
Thank you. Thank you through the Deputy Mayor. I will be brief with this part of the presentation. Just a quick slide on the structure. Hamilton Utilities is the holding corporation that holds the interest in Electra, which is 17.31%. Electra does have a separate board of directors, and as you know, Mayor Horvath is one of those directors, and Sean Donnelly is the independent director that is appointed by the City of Hamilton. I'll maybe call upon Sean Donnelly in a minute. I believe he is on, albeit I think we're running a few minutes ahead. I also wanted to recognize the directors of HUC, which includes Greg McManus, Julia Camula, Councillor Tammy Wang, and Elizabeth Donato. And as we've mentioned earlier, that this is the last month for Krista Wessel, who has been a director, and we've already recognized her in the previous meeting. Jeffrey Cowan and the staff at HACO provide the management services to administer the corporation, and you'll see that it's a number of HACO directors that are also HUC directors. With that, I'll turn it over to Electra at this point in time. Is Sean Donnelly on? And if he wants to just make a couple of quick comments. I can't see who's on, unfortunately. If not, I'll turn it over to Norm Loberg and Electra. Thank you.
Thanks, Lori. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Good. Great. That's a good start. Well, I'm Norm Loberg, and I'm chair of Electra. And I hope I'm joined by Daniel Diaz, our CFO, and Brian Bentz, our CEO.
One moment, Norm. We'll confirm if your hopes are reality. Are they with us?
We're just a little bit early, so I'm not sure
That's
they're
not a bad
on
thing,
yet.
Norm. I don't see them there, but you might want to proceed, Norm, and then when they join us, they can carry on with the presentation.
Right. Okay, good. As you may be aware, Daniel Diaz is our newly appointed CFO, taking over the role from John Basilio, whom many of you know. John retired and probably sitting on a nice warm beach in Florida right now, or maybe too warm a beach in Florida right now, but I'm sure he's away from the nonsense we're going through up here in the north with the forest fires. But in any event, I'm delighted to be with you today. And as this is our first AGM since the 2022 municipal elections, I'd like to congratulate and welcome all the councillors with us today, and especially those who are newly elected. Our staff is looking forward to working with you, and they're available to you should any constituent issues arise that involve input from Electra. As Lori already mentioned, I'd like to recognize Mayor Horvath and welcome her to the Electra Board of Directors. The mayor has already been very helpful to the board, and we appreciate her counsel and guidance. The two other mayors from our shareholder communities have joined Mayor Horvath on the board, Stephen Del Duca from Vaughan and Alex Nuttall from Barrie. So congratulations to them all. We appreciate their participation and the advice that they've already provided since joining Electra last fall. We haven't heard from Sean, but I would like to take the opportunity to recognize Sean Donnelly for the very active role he continues to have on our board. Sean is past chair of our corporate governance and nominating committee, but he's now serving as chair of the People and Safety Committee. He's also an ex officio member of the Development Committee and also sits on the Audit, Finance, and Risk Management Committee. So he's a very, very busy independent board director, and we appreciate his very sound counsel and advice. Sean's experience is valued, and we appreciate this, along with, of course, the management team works very closely with Sean as well. It's hard to believe, but we have completed 6 years of operation since the merger, and our accomplishments are significant. Importantly, shareholder returns have been considerably higher than had the merger not occurred, and we achieved the synergies in our operations ahead of plan as well. From a numbers perspective, in fact, dividends paid to Huck over the past 6 years have amounted to over $78 million. But more importantly, that's 15 million more than if we had retained the status quo. Our capital investments to accommodate growth and replace aging infrastructure have been significant. These investments are being made in communities across our service territory, including here, of course, in Hamilton.
Norm, sorry to interrupt you. Just wanted to check in with you. I know there was a presentation that was included with our agenda, and so I wanted to know if we were using the presentation for your part. Also wanted to indicate to you, in case it wasn't obvious, that Sean Donnelly has joined the presentation. Not sure if others have joined in, but just wanted to say if you're referring to any of the slides here, we can put them up so the public and the members in the chamber can see them. If you're not, then proceed without the slides, and we'll wait for the slide presenter to arrive. Just let me know.
Yeah. My remarks are strictly outside the formal presentation of Danielle and Brian, so I don't have any particular slides to refer to, and my remarks are just about wrapped up at this point.
Welcome. Thank you so much for the clarity. Carry on, Norm. Apologies for the interruption.
Okay, and welcome, Sean.
Thanks, Norm.
I've already talked in very lucid terms about your involvement on the board, so I hope you can handle that okay.
Thank you.
Our consolidated workforce and facilities provide Electra with the capability to rapidly deploy sufficient emergency crews to areas in our territory that experience power outages during serious weather events. That's a real positive as a result of the merger. We've maintained a significant footprint in our shareholder communities with office space, garages, and warehouse facilities. And we've invested more than $5 million to support frontline social agencies, hospitals, and universities since 2017. Our 2022 annual sustainability report has been released. It is available in digital format on our website. And each of you will be receiving a hard copy shortly if you have not already received it. The report outlines the progress that we're making on our goal to be a net zero organization by 2050. And of course, our important work in equity, diversity, and inclusion is continuing with programs being instituted within the company and investments being made to support various EDI agencies and programs in the community. Importantly, our EDI scholarship in partnership with the McMaster DeGroote Directors College is expected to accept its third candidate in September. As you know, our strategic plan is renewed on a 3-year cycle that involves shareholder input. We're now commencing the second review of the plan. Our strategic pillars of grid modernization, customer experience excellence, and growth of business remain relevant. However, we are adjusting the plan as required, considering the significant changes that are underway in our sector. These changes focused on future supply demand are largely driven by government climate change targets and involve the electrification of transportation and building heating systems. As leaders in the industry, Electra is directly engaged with federal and provincial authorities on these matters, and our input is sought after by government and industry experts alike. So Brian and Danielle, hopefully they're on board now, will be discussing these matters in more detail. But before they do, I do want to thank the Hamilton Utilities Corporation Board of Directors, Lori Tugman and your team, Hamilton City Council, and city's management team for our strong support of Electra. So with that, I'll turn things over to Brian and Danielle, hoping they are online at this point. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thanks very much. And if they're not here, it's okay. We have an activity we can buy a bit of time with, but just checking to see if they're here. At this time, they are not, so let's do an activity. We did not receive the Hamilton Utilities Corporation presentation at the end of their presentation. It was very brief, so brief that we didn't even notice it had ended. So appreciative of that, for the record. Brevity is also helpful in these settings. And so at this time, could I have a mover and seconder to receive that presentation? Councillor Huang, Councillor Kassar, and we'll do an electronic vote of that, just to receive that presentation now. Item 5.1. I now see Councillor Spadafora has joined us and is also in favor. Councillor Shaddison is in favor. Councillor McMeekin's in favor. Excellent, 13-0. So we'll take a couple of breaths here in anticipation of others joining us. And so briefly we'll be quiet and wait for a couple of minutes. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I do see Brian's name on the board at this point.
I do as well. Brian, are you there and able to hear us?
Be on mute.
We'll just wait and our clerks will get in touch with Brian through the technologies and we will report back shortly. Thanks for your patience, everyone.
Morning, Pram. It's Angela from the Clerk's Department. If you're able to hear me, we're ready for your presentation whenever you're ready to share your screen. Pram, are you able to hear me? It's Angela from the Clerk's Department. Or Brian?
Just so nobody worries too deeply, if the presentation can't be delivered to us today, it's all right. We A, have a copy, and B, the resolution is to approve the shareholders' resolutions today. So we're still probably able to do so. If we can't get the presentation, there could be a time perhaps to reschedule that if not available today.
To the Deputy Mayor, we can also share the presentation from inside council chambers, but I'm not sure who would like to speak to it. I think it was Brian that was going to speak to the presentation.
Indeed, yeah.
So.
Is anybody else from Lecture Incorporated Corporation who would like to speak to these slides? Just identify yourself. Otherwise, like I said, we can still complete the resolutions portion of the meeting. These are available online for the public to review if they should wish.
Hello.
Hi, Brian. It's Angela from the Clerk's Department. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
Okay, we can share the presentation from here if that is better for you on your end.
That would be fine.
Okay, one moment.
Thanks. Just to let everybody know, folks from Electra are here and they're going to provide the presentation shortly. We're just loading the presentation up in our system so that we can share in advance the slides. I would ask if there's any possibility for summative remarks or brevity during the presentation. It is 39 slides. That would be much appreciated. So I wanted to flag that in advance, where we have had this presentation material in advance. The public has had it in advance. And so wherever you're able to employ brevity would be very much appreciated. Thank you.
Okay, good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So appreciate the opportunity to provide an update to, sorry, we just have an echo in here.
Hi, Brian. It's Angela again.
Okay.
Are you able to speak so we can just hear if it's better
Well,
now?
I'd like to begin by, sorry, still have that echo here. Yeah.
Sorry, folks, there are just some technical difficulties on Electra's end. They're resolving them, and they'll get the presentation going as soon as they've been resolved.
Yeah. Okay. It's all right. Okay. How's that? You can hear me now?
We can hear you,
There's
yes.
no
I think the
echo.
echo is on
Thank
your
you.
end, so if it's okay
All
for
right.
you, then it's
We'll
okay
begin
for
the
us.
presentation. I apologize for the technical issues. I'd like to begin by introducing our new Chief Financial Officer, Danielle Diaz. Danielle was appointed as our Executive Vice President and Chief Financial Officer in March of this year. Prior to that, she had been appointed, she served in the capacity of Vice President of Projects, Treasury, and Taxation before being named interim CFO in October 22, and then Executive Vice President and Chief Financial Officer in March of 23. And many of you may be familiar with Danielle, as prior to the formation of Electra Utilities, Danielle served as Vice President of Finance at Horizon Utilities. She's also a director on the MIRI board, which provides, it's an insurance reciprocal, which provides most of the insurance needs of the 50 or so LDCs in Ontario. She has more than 15 years of experience as a strategic finance professional and nearly a decade in the electricity sector. She's a chartered professional accountant, CPA-CA, and holds a Bachelor of Accounting degree from Brock University. So we're very pleased to have Danielle here today, and she'll be speaking in a moment about the financial performance of Electra in 2022. So the agenda today, going to cover a few items. First, the relative performance of Electra vis-a-vis its peer group in Ontario, and some of the initiatives that we're making regarding ESG and community-based support. We'll be talking about the financial results, as I indicated, and then speak to the future of electricity in Ontario. It's a dynamic time in the sector, time of significant transition that will affect Electra's future operations in terms of both opportunities and risks. And we'll talk about our strategy in response to the changing dynamics in the electricity sector. And finally, the shareholder engagement process that we'll be embarking on between now and the balance of the year to engage our municipal shareholder, the Hamilton Utilities Corporation, and the City of Hamilton in that process. If I had to summarize, I'll say the main points of today's presentation, it would be firstly that the merger business case that we established prior to the merger in 2017 has proven out. It's demonstrated value, and that has taken the form of incremental dividends to our shareholders over the non-merger case, which I believe our chair referred to in his remarks. We have high performance as an organization vis-a-vis our peers when we look at operating costs, when we look at reliability indices, and when we look at our rates. So relative rates in Ontario and the Greater Toronto and Hamilton area, some of the lowest rates, and that's a function of those low operating costs. We continue to perform and have a strong focus on community and ESG issues. And the company is well positioned for the future and the energy transition because of the scale, because of our performance metrics, and because of our position as a leader in innovation and efficiency in the Ontario electricity sector. The results of operations in 2022, Danielle will go through in a moment, but suffice it to say, slightly under budget, and a number of reasons for that. So our budget was $131 million, and results came in around just almost at 119 million. Largely impacted by higher interest rates that occurred during the year in 2022, the ongoing impacts of COVID on our operations, especially as it relates to customer collections, and one-time charges to operations, which Danielle will talk about in a moment. So when we look at the synergy track record, this chart indicates on the black line what our forecasted budgeted synergies would be since inception in 2017 up till the current date in 2023. So these are net cost reductions from the consolidated entities' operating costs on a cumulative basis. And as you can see, we're tracking our budget would be approximately 119 million cumulative reduction in consolidated operating costs as a result of bringing these 5 utilities together. We overperformed on that. As you can see, that the actual results indicate that we achieved almost $136 million in reduced costs over that same period. And then this has translated into higher dividends for our shareholders on the next slide. So the green bar on the following slide indicates what was actually achieved for Electra as a consolidated entity, and the purple line indicates what the dividends would be on a consolidated basis to Electra's shareholders had the merger not happened. And the delta there on a cumulative basis is $108.7 million in incremental dividends to our shareholders, or a 34% increase over what would have been dispersed had that merger not occurred. So when we look at our bills, residential bills, we benchmark ourselves in 3 key areas. And one is around affordability, one is around reliability, and the other one is around sustainability. So this chart comes from information provided by the Ontario Energy Board. It issues a document called the OEB Statistical Yearbook and provides relative information for all LDCs across the province. And so we benchmark ourselves against that. The dark gray bar at the line shows the charge for an average residential customer using 700 kilowatt hours of electricity on a monthly basis. So the average customer in Ontario, across the 5 million customers in the province, would pay approximately $51 per month for electricity distribution services. So this is just the distribution component of the bill, the low voltage, the poles and wires, the local poles and wires, and that's our business. There's also the transmission grid, which is operated by Hydro One, and the generation, which is operated by companies like Ontario Power Generation and Bruce Power. We've just extracted out the distribution component of the bill because that's the only part of the bill that Electra charges for. It collects for the entire amount, but it retains and has accountability for operating costs on the distribution component. So the average $51, the 3 green to the right, or the 5 green to the right, are the 5 rate zones in Electra's service area. So you can see we have, on the left, we have Guelph, Horizon. In the middle, there's Power Stream. Then we have EnerSource and Brampton. They all converge around $45 to $48, so lower than the average cost. And then when we compare ourselves on the left-hand side to Toronto Hydro or Hydro One, we can see that in Toronto, the average customer would pay $55 for that distribution service, and approximately $45 to $48 in our service area. So it's about $100 to $120 savings per year for a residential customer because of the lower costs and lower rates in our service area. And then similarly, the Hydro One has an urban retail rate, and that's about $57. So we compare favorably on a rates basis against our peer group and against the larger utilities in the province. Similarly, when we look at reliability indices, there's 2 things that we look at. It's called SAIFI and SAIDI. SAIFI is System Average Interruption Frequency Index. So it refers to the number of outages that an average customer will experience during a year. So in this case, you can see that the numbers range from approximately 1 to 2 times. So the average customer will see 1 to 2 outages per year. And again, Electra compares favorably to its peer group. Hydro One experiences approximately 4 outages per year. and Toronto Hydro 1.5, and Electra is in the 1.15 times range, or 2.3% below the average. And then the other reliability indice that we measure is how long did the outage occur. So if the average customer is experiencing in our case, 1.15 outages per year, how long did that outage occur? What was the duration of the outage? And as you can see for Electra, that was approximately 1.35 hours. So a little over an hour. Now there's a controllable and non-controllable component to that. So when we look at what we control, we factor out two things called major event days, which are major storms, which blow through our area. So they are discounted because they're anomalies, but they're included in the total rate, but not in the controllable rate. And the other item is loss of supply. So if we lose loss of supply from the transmission grid, because Hydro One transmission grid did not deliver the power to our area, that's discounted out too. And when we look at controllable SAIDI for Electra, it's 38 minutes. So, and that's a result, and that number has been driven down over the course of the last several years, largely as a result of processes we have with respect to restoration time for our crews and automation of our grid. So putting digital switches and digital devices onto the grid allows us to isolate outages more quickly, and customers see less outage minutes because we put that intelligence on the grid. Next item we have, so that's affordability, reliability, and then sustainability. So we're measuring our GHG footprint, our greenhouse gas emission reduction footprint since 2016. And we've reduced that, as it says here, by 15.4% over our 2016 baseline. And the number of reasons for that, one primary reason is the management of emissions on our diesel fleet. So we do have a number of large bucket trucks, radial boom derricks that are. We've employed a technology called Dynacert, which effectively uses electrolysis to inject hydrogen and oxygen into the combustion process and reduces the emissions of those trucks as they transport or work through the system. And we've seen a 13% reduction in fuel consumption and associated reduced greenhouse gases because of this Dynacert technology. We're also looking at the building envelope and footprint of our GHG emissions for our facilities. Most notably, we're consolidating two facilities in Mississauga and Brampton under one gold LEED facility that will become net zero over time. So it has solar arrays and meets the gold LEED standard. And that building will become operational at the end of this year. And so we're continuing to look at ways that we can reduce our GHG emission profile and are committed to 25% reduction over 2016 levels by 2027 and net zero by 2050. And then finally, we look at operating costs per customer. So this is driving a lot of the affordability issues. And once again, similarly, when we look at OM&A, so this is operations, maintenance, and administrative costs per customer, again from the OEB yearbook, which is issued annually by the Ontario Energy Board. We can see that Electra's cost per customer is about $250. Toronto is at $350 and Hydro One at $410. And then the graph below shows the net increase in cost since 2016. So Electra has a 0.1% increase in our operating cost per customer since 2016. So the synergies has offset inflationary increases in organic growth, and those types of things to keep the costs flat over that period. And the comparator groups are there as well. The other metric we look at is total cost per customer. So this includes the operating cost plus the capital cost combined. And once again, we compare favorably on that as well. So the bottom would be the operating cost per customer. The top is the capital cost per customer. And Electra has one of the lowest total cost per customer values, certainly within the largest LDC electricity sector, but also across the 57 LDCs within Ontario more broadly. And then finally, we did talk about the rates before. So this shows the rates for the delivery charge for a City of Hamilton customer in the what we call the Horizon rate zone. And that bill is $48.06 per month. And when we benchmark that against the LDC average, it's a savings of $131.28 per year versus, as I said, the average residential customer using 700 kilowatt hours of electricity in the province. Moving along, we want to talk about our ESG report. And this report was issued earlier this year. It's our first ever
Sorry, could you just tell everybody what ESG stands for?
Environmental and social governance report. And it outlines all of the initiatives that we have with respect to the things we've done on the ESG front. We encourage you to look at that report. It's online, and it covers a lot of areas with respect to the initiatives that we have in this in these categories. And we have won a couple of awards recently, which I'd like to highlight. One was the award from a vendor called Novinium. So we have a lot of aging cable in our system. And instead of replacing the cable, which is very costly and has an environmental impact, we inject the cable with a polymer that extends its life. We've injected approximately 946 kilometers of underground cable, mitigating 12,302 tons of CO2 as a result of this initiative. And we won an Underground Environmental Stewardship Award from Novinium, which has operations across North America, for leadership in, I'll say, friendly cable injection that has positive environmental impacts. We also won an award in June of this year, Innovation Award from Sustainability Leadership. And Sustainability Leadership is a resource network that addresses needs for climate actionable change and a sustainable future. And organization supports networks of businesses to set and achieve sustainability targets across Hamilton, Burlington, as well as Halton, Peel, Brant, and Niagara regions. So they gave us the award for Best Environmental Initiative, largely as a result of that fuel consumption reduction, the Dynasert technology initiative that we had that resulted in a 12% reduction in fuel consumption. Next item we want to talk about is capital investments. So this is really in three areas. One would be automation. So we want to we're talking about having a baseline standard for digitization and automation across our grid. We look at all of our feeders across our entire service area. We do a best performing feeder analysis and a worst performing feeder analysis, and we do investigations as to why we have performance that is, on that scale, and take remedial action accordingly. One of the things we do is build that digital automation into the system. So we're trying to get to a point where every feeder in our system has the same number of automated switches or automated devices. And this is very important because the control room, we have control rooms across our service area, are monitoring in real time the power flows on the grid and the outages on the grid. And when an outage occurs or a fault occurs on the system, it immediately reports back to the control room, and the control room operator can see that fault on the system. If they have digital switches, they can remotely isolate that fault to reduce the impact on customers who see that and are experiencing that outage. So that's much more efficient than sending out a crew and manually opening a switch or a line to isolate. So that's why automation helps our restoration and reliability figures. So we've invested a lot into the Hamilton grid in terms of building automation in the system. So that's one. The second one is rehabilitation. So we do have a lot of aging cable, aging grid on our system, and we've done a lot of work as it itemizes here. Renewing, replacing underground, Millen Road, Barton Street, Fruitland Road, replacing underground cable, Stone Church Road West, Gar Street, and then expanding the system as well. So there's obviously new development in the system. We have to connect all of those subdivisions and customers, and we do that by expanding capacity at our transformer stations, and also another area that we enhance efficiency is through what we call voltage conversion. So voltage conversion has happened in the Aberdeen area, Central Avenue area, Deerhurst, and Dewitt Road. We want to get on one voltage standard, and in total, in 2023, we plan to invest $22.5 million in capital renewal projects in Hamilton, and so that work is ongoing. We've also working with the Hamilton region on the decarbonization hub. We've had good discussions with the representatives, including Cirrus and Carlisle and Linda and Denara on the transition accelerator. And Electra is committed to working with the Hamilton Region Decarbonization Hub as a contributor, both in kind and direct. As you move through this process, we think it's a sort of best-in-class process, and believe that we can help you achieve your decarbonization goals in the region as the electricity provider for the city of Hamilton. Next, we talk about our community support. Done a lot within the city over the last year. We have high levels of volunteerism, and our people care about what we're doing and how we give back. I'm riding in the Enbridge Ride for Cancer on the weekend. We'll start at Exhibition Stadium on Saturday morning and end up at McMaster University on day one. So looking forward to that. But our teams do provide a lot of support to the local charities and communities. We put a priority on food security issues, support for youth and families, and mental health programs in disadvantaged communities. And our total investment in Hamilton was $135,000 for 2022. And we're also, I should mention, working with the Ukrainian Embassy and the Ukrainian World Congress to donate funds to enable Ukrainian utilities to procure much needed electrical equipment to repair grids that have been damaged in the conflict there. So with that, I'll turn it over to Danielle, who walked through the 2022 financial results.
Thank you, Brian, and good morning. Hope everybody can hear me well. If we could move to the next slide, please.
Yeah, Danielle,
So just briefly, this is our overall principal corporate structure. I won't spend too much time on this. Essentially, there has been no changes in 2022 to Electra's structure. As you can see on the top, it displays the ownership owned by 7 municipal shareholders. Electra Inc. Electra Inc. is an investing holding company with no operating assets and owns 100% of the common shares of Electra Utilities, Horizon Solar Corp, and Energy Solutions. Next slide. So this slide really provides our key size statistics at a glance. So AUC, or the utility, it serves over 1 million electricity distribution customers within the greater Golden Horseshoe area, and we are the largest municipally owned LDC in Canada. We serve a range of customers from residential, small commercial to large industrial and institutional. But as you can see from the slide, our primary customer base is residential at 90%. And what this does, this creates a stable customer base with little price or volume risk for the utility. We have, as I said, you have little customer concentration risk. In 2022, our top 10 customers within the utility represented about 6% of our total billed revenue. And of that 6%, the largest customers include several municipal government entities. Moving to assets, our total assets in 2022 were $5.7 billion, of which $3.9 billion is within property, plant, and equipment. So on average, our annual capital spend, which isn't shown here, but is approximately about $260 to $290 million within the utility. And the makeup of this, we spend approximately or devote approximately 50% of our capital to system renewal investment with a focus on underground asset renewal, which is the primary contributor to declining reliability performance, as well as investment in the renewal of overhead assets to address the impact of weather outages, which have increased in both duration and severity over the last few years. With respect to 2022 EBITDA, Electra achieved $342 million in 2022, and this is principally represented by the stable regulated cash flows of 88%, with the remaining 12% contributed by our competitive businesses. Next slide, please. So this slide is a snapshot really of our regulated business that is well diversified in a variety of factors. Our operating territory spans 17 municipalities, communities, largely focused in the Greater Toronto Area, which is a highly vibrant market and the economic and financial hub of Canada. As I stated, our customers, we are one of 2 regulated utilities in Ontario that serve over 1 million customers, which is previously.
Welcome to WebEx. To continue in English, press 1.
Sorry about that. Sorry. Is the audio okay? Yeah.
Can you hear us?
You can't hear me?
No. We can hear you. Yeah.
I'm sorry. Can you hear me?
Yes. Can you hear us?
Yes.
Great. Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. So I'm okay to continue?
Yes.
Sorry, apologies, thank you. Where was I? Okay, so customers, we are one of 2 regulated utilities in Ontario that serve over 1 million customers. This makes us the largest municipally owned electric utility in North America. And then next slide, please. Sorry about that. So with respect to peer comparison, Brian had covered a little bit of this, but really this slide shows the breakdown of the utility space in Ontario and our overall contribution to the province. So as you can see, Electra Utilities takes up 1/5 of the total customer share in the province, just behind Hydro One, while operating with a relatively undersized asset base, which demonstrates the capital efficiency of our business. As Brian had previously covered, we have managed to consistently be at the top of the list for operational statistics while managing to keep our costs low, which is demonstrated by the OM&A per customer of $256 for Electra compared to the LDC average of $322, which is basically approximately 20% lower than our peers. And this allows us to keep the average residential bill lower for our customers compared to our peers. Next slide, please. So moving on to the 2022 financial results. So as Brian had mentioned, Electra achieved a satisfactory performance on net income, notwithstanding the challenges presented in 2022. So overall, we achieved $119 million in net income, which was about $12 million unfavorable to our budget. So with respect to the performance of the utility, Electra Utilities net income was about $2 million unfavorable to the budget of $120 million. Lingering impacts of the pandemic, particularly janitorial costs, rising credit losses due to rising customer arrears, coupled with high inflation and increasing interest rates have had a negative impact on the operating results of the utility. Brian had indicated that we did experience some one-time adjustments, and this was communicated throughout the course of last year in our quarterly shareholder reports. So we made shareholders aware of a potential impairment within the utility related to our outage management system. And during the fourth quarter of 2022, management here completed its assessment and determined that the asset was partially impaired and recorded an impairment charge of $3 million within the utility. So these costs were partially offset, though, by a higher than planned distribution revenue and other revenue from higher late payment charges from an increase in overdue accounts receivable balances. With respect to Energy Solutions experienced a net loss of about $300,000, which was about $10 million lower than budgeted net income of $10 million. And there are really two main contributors to this unfavorability. So within the year, our services business did record an impairment loss on an equity investment of $6 million. And this is largely due to the fact that when we reviewed this investment and its ability to continue as a going concern, we determined that there were concerns with respect to its financial performance, and additional financing would be required for this investment to continue. And as a result, it triggered an impairment analysis, and we wrote down the investment. The other item that's contributing to the unfavorability is, if you recall, in 2021, Electra purchased a storm restoration business. And within that purchase agreement, or that share purchase agreement, it contained language regarding contingent share consideration, which is payable based on exceeding an agreed upon earnings target within 2021 and 2022. So in 2022, HPS, or Holland Power Services, exceeded those earning targets, resulting in a higher than expected earnout payable to the former owner. So as a result of this increase in this liability, or this contingent share consideration, the services business recorded a $7 million expense within the income statement. With respect to capital, our net capital expenditures for the year in 2022 were $292 million, about $32 million lower than budget. And there are three main drivers to this unfavorability. So within the utility, we did experience delays within our Kennedy Road Operations Center. And then within our services business, we experienced a delay in the acquisition of a natural gas generating asset. Next slide, please. So dividends, Brian had already provided an overview of dividends with respect to the current year and basically historical performance. But just as a reminder, our dividend policy, it targets dividends at 60% of shared consolidated MIFR's net income. And so the trends in this slide are based on the 2023 financial plan that was reported to shareholders in November 2022. So with respect to the dividends that are forecasted for Hamilton Utilities Corporation, we're expecting on average dividends of about $14 million annually from 2023 to 2025. And with that, I will turn it back over, I believe, to Brian.
Thanks, Danielle.
Thanks, folks. You've got about another 12 or so slides. Just wonder if you could keep the pace up a little bit. That'd be really helpful. Thank you.
Okay. Next slide. When we look, well, let's move to the next one. So in summary, this slide here outlines many of the achievements that have occurred since the merger in terms of maintaining high levels of customer satisfaction, our greenhouse gas emission reductions, almost $300 million invested in capital. We have $620 million in distribution revenue. It also mentioned during the year we had a return to office in June of 2022. And the health and safety of our employees was a high priority, and wellness of our employees. It's a high priority for us in 22. We cautiously brought those employees back to the office, paused our vaccination policy and mask mandates, and introduced a hybrid work policy, which is working well. And we also negotiated a collective agreement with the Power Workers Union, a successful collective agreement, which was ratified in 2022, and are moving forward with that. And with respect to community giving, Electric continued to provide community support with $1.3 million in donations under, as we mentioned earlier, our Electric Cares community support program. We're also the official energy supplier of the Niagara 2022 Canada Summer Games, and we're actively involved in the United Way Fall campaign in the city of Hamilton. Now, turning the page here, that's the look back in 22, which we believe was a successful year. But our sector is undergoing significant transformational change. And the reason primarily for that is decarbonization. So we know that governments and the business community and individuals, for that matter, have an objective to reduce the carbon footprint in Ontario. And for us, that we see the electricity grid as a catalyst for decarbonization. Ontario, as we've talked about, has a highly decarbonized grid. And so we can leverage that grid as a catalyst for carbon reduction in two main areas. The first one is around passenger vehicles. So as we move from the internal combustion engine to battery-powered electric vehicles, we reduce, obviously, the emission profile, and the grid will provide the fuel for those electric vehicles. And we've done modeling around that within Electra's service area. We know that there are approximately 30 to 40,000 electric vehicles within our service area, serving 3.5 million people and 1.1 million customers today. But in the future, we see that number growing rapidly. Between the next 10 and 15 years, that number will increase from 30 to 40,000 to almost 2 million, 1.5 to 2 million electric vehicles. And when we look at the impact on the grid, just for perspective, on the total provincial demand in Ontario on an annualized basis is around 23,000 megawatts of peak demand. Usually occurs in the summer when we have high air conditioning load. For Electra, it's about 5,500 megawatts. So we're about a quarter of the province. We know that if we add these electric vehicles onto our grid, it's going to increase that peak demand by about 2,500 megawatts. So almost a 50% increase because of electric vehicles. The other component of it, potentially, which is a longer term impact, is switching from gas heating to electric heating in the form of air source heat pumps or ground source heat pumps. And so this can be, will have a significant impact on the emission profile in the province, but again, it will also impact the grid significantly. And so we see demand increasing, and so we have to adapt to that, and we have to enable it. So the goal for us is to maintain the capacity on the grid to help consumers through the journey as they move to electrification, whether it's an EV, whether it's a battery in your home, whether it's a solar array on your roof, to integrate those things within the home and integrate them to the grid. And so enable that electrification to occur. And Electra should and will be the catalyst for that to happen. So that's our challenge as an entity. We move to the next slide. We know that the independent electricity system operator is seeing this happening. So the IESO is the entity that procures all the generation in the province, and it forecasts electrical load for the entire province. And what it's saying is that we have a deficiency in supply today, that we need to build capacity in the system to enable electrification to occur. So they're saying there's 16,000 megawatts of additional capacity at risk. Again, 22,000 megawatts is peak demand, 44,000 megawatts is installed capacity across the province. So this is why you're seeing things like Pickering B, which its life may be extended 30 years. And the ISO is issuing requests for proposals for storage generation and the last one for natural gas to increase capacity on the system. And that's going to happen. They also looked at what was called a pathways report. The next slide. So this pathways report said, if we went to full decarbonization in 2050, what would it look like for Ontario? And they're saying we have 42,000 megawatts of installed capacity now, with a peak demand of around 23 to 24,000, because you need more capacity to meet the peak demand. If we go to full electrification and decarbonization by 2050, we're going to need 88,000 megawatts of capacity, which is going to cost between $390 and $450 billion for the province. So this is a massive undertaking, and the utility is a critical component of it. Our view as Electra is that we shouldn't just be buying power, centralized power, from a wholesale grid. We should enable transactive energy and empower consumers at the edge of the grid. So instead of building a nuclear plant and transmitting the power through high voltage lines and then through low voltage lines to the home, why not use the home as a virtual power plant? So, and we've done this. We've proven that this can work. Again, integrating solar, battery, the electric vehicle can be a mobile storage unit. It can be a supply point for power. Note that the Ford Lightning has 133 kilowatt hours of storage capacity. That's about 3 days of consumption for a home. You can reverse the polarity on what we call vehicle to grid, and that can become a source of electricity for the home, and you can share that in the neighborhoods. So this is what we want to enable, working with the Ontario Energy Board, working with the Ministry of Energy, working with the ISO on, I'll say, a reimagined grid, and Electra showing leadership in that area to enable this new grid. And so, again, consumer empowerment, you don't have as many lines, power lines that are being connected through the grid. You don't have line losses because you have heat losses when you distribute electricity over that period. So we want to see an integrated grid that empowers consumers and achieves the province's goal of, and our goal of decarbonization. So next slide. So this talks about that emerging theme and the impacts on Electra, and DERs are an acronym for Distributed Energy Resources, which includes things like I was talking about before, the storage, the battery in the electric vehicle, the solar array on the home, also what we call the software to pull it all together and optimize it in the home, but also aggregate it in the neighborhood through intelligence. We see going forward, technology can be an enabler, but also a disruptor. We have to monitor electricity demand as EVs come on our system, as we move to the heat pumps, which is going to increase electricity demand, but always be focused on our customers' needs first. And then finally, we translate this into our strategy. So if we move to the next slide. Our strategy speaks to how is Electra responding to this at a higher level? And we have, I'll say at a high level, our goal is to become what we define as an integrated energy services provider, which is very different than the traditional poles and wires business, which is a passive transporter of electrons from the wholesale power grid to the customer meter base. We want to build intelligence on the grid. We want to enable consumer choice at the edge of the grid. We want to have these low carbon, digitized customer solutions enabled at the edge of the grid to achieve, again, empowerment for consumers, decarbonization, and lower costs, does all of those things. And so we do that through three strategies. One is what we call customer. So it's a digital customer strategy, enhancing brand loyalty, enhancing trust with the customer so we can provide them with the integrated services with the grid and in their home. Our grid has to be modernized. It has to have intelligence on it to allow this to happen, to allow these electric vehicles to connect to our grid, to be able to monitor and manage the growth of the grid. And then growth is investment in value-added services for consumers. So it enhances the value proposition for consumers, but it also enhances the value that we have at Electra for our shareholders, the economic value for our shareholders. So that at a high level is our strategy. And then finally, we have a path in our, if we can go to the next slide, in our unanimous shareholder agreement, in our unanimous shareholder agreement that says that every 3 years, so in 2017 was the date of the merger. 2020, we did a review with our shareholders. 2023, doing another review with our shareholders. So we're working through this revised strategy 2.0. We had a session with our board of directors to go through the strategy, advise them of the strategy, and have the board endorse the strategy, which they will do over the course of the summer. And then in the fall, we want to engage Hamilton Utilities Corp and the City of Hamilton on that strategy to get your input on your thoughts on the strategy, areas for improvement, how it may impact that, and then finalize the strategy in 2023. So that is our report. Again, we think we've had a very good year and that we're positioned well for the future and looking forward to strong collaboration with our municipal shareholders to create value, remain customer focused, and manage through the energy transition. Happy to take any questions, Madam Chair.
Call into the audio again.
Madam, it isn't, but cool. Deputy Chair Kretsch here, and I will see the first speaker on our list is Councillor Huang for questions.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Thank you both, Brian and Danielle, for your presentation. It was highly informative. I have a couple of just fundamental type questions. How much advocacy or connection do you have to the IESO and to the other distributors within Ontario?
I'm sorry, just had some technical difficulty here. Could you repeat the question? Sorry.
Sure, definitely. I just have a fundamental question. It's how much connection or advocacy do you have with the IESO or to other distributors that are in Ontario?
Yes. So we have, we're very active in this space. We have a very good, I'd say a good working relationship with the Ontario Energy Board and the IESO. I was the chair of the IESO Stakeholder Advisory Committee for over a decade and worked directly with their board of directors, know their CEO and senior management very well, was on another board with the current CEO at the IESO. So I think there's a strong working relationship there. And there's a desire on both parties to work through this, whether it's conservation demand management and the LDC's delivering on CDM, or whether it's enabling DERs through what we call a DSO, distribution system operator model. There's a desire in both of those parties to make this happen. We're also working with the other 50 plus LDCs in the province through trade associations, normally the Electricity Distributors Association and the Ontario Energy Association. So Electra is on the board of both of those entities, and we work collaboratively with Hydro One, Toronto Hydro, Hydro Ottawa, all of the municipalities across Ontario to really advocate for this change. And I think there's good alignment for the change, and but it's going to take some time. But thanks for the question.
Thanks. And before you interject, Councillor Huang, yeah, you use the terms DER and LDC and a couple of other acronyms. Could you expand those acronyms so the public who are listening in will know what you're talking about?
Mr. Betts, I was just wondering if you could actually expand on some of those acronyms. What is DER? What is LDC? And what are DSO?
Okay, thank you. LDC is a local distribution company. So that is under the Ontario Energy Board Act of Ontario. Every distributor in the province has to have a license to convey electricity at lower than 50,000 volts. And so there are 53 utilities in the province that are local electricity distributors. So they take the power from the high voltage transmission grid, the towers, and it gets stepped down, the voltage gets stepped down, and they deliver the power to the meter base in the homes and businesses. So that whole network, that low voltage network, is licensed. And it's licensed as a local distribution company, or LDC. So Electra is an LDC, Hydro One is an LDC, Toronto Hydro is, and Oakville Hydro, Arlington Hydro is. There's 50 of them, but it's a licensed electricity distributor in Ontario. DSO, was that the question? DSO, so every electricity market, like any market, requires buyers and sellers. So traditionally, the buying and selling of electricity has been at what we would describe the wholesale level. So that is on the transmission grid. So it'd be like Bruce Power has a nuclear plant. We have Pickering, we have Darlington. They're owned by Ontario Power Generation. They contract with the IESO. They enter into power purchase agreements with the IESO to inject that power into the grid, and they get paid for it. We collect the money for it, and we send it to the IESO, and then they pay OPG or Bruce for that power. That's a wholesale independent system operator. They dispatch the power in real time, they plan for the system, and they operate the system, and they procure the power. A DSO is a distribution system operator that does those same things to consumers and the low voltage market. So an LDC could be a DSO by enabling this, what I was talking about earlier, these transactions at the edge of the grid to procure and dispatch that power in real time. And it can defer our capital requirements to build more poles and wires on the system. So that's where we want this integrated model. But a DSO is effectively a system operator at the low voltage level that dispatches and procures power for the system.
Okay. Thank you. My next question, and thank you for that update, that very general foundational sort of level setting. When we see what's happening on the Pathways report, where we're saying that today we're at 42,000 megawatts, but in order for us to decarbonize, we have to look at 88,000 megawatts. How much advocacy can you do to the IESO or to any of the Ontario Energy Board to look at reinstituting, say, feed-in tariffs or anything that will allow for all of our municipalities to potentially be energy generators to feed that into the grid? That's something that we did in the past, but now we don't have that capability anymore. So what does that, is there an opportunity for looking at it from that sort of perspective?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, the Pathways report, I think it says of that 88,000, they have to procure, I think it's 59,000 megawatts of non-emitting resources. So that would include things like the feed-in tariff program, also conservation. They're saying that it requires 5,000 megawatts of conservation. And we're talking to the OEB and the ISO about a renewed conservation framework. The utilities delivered conservation successfully from 2010 to about 2019. And we think we should be back in that business to enable energy efficiency, demand response, demand reduction. You know, a megawatt is cheaper and has no emissions. So we want to be in the megawatt business. We want to be in the renewables business. And we think there is, yes, very good opportunity to enable that, whether it's feed and tariff, but procurement of renewables has to be part of this solution.
Sorry to interject, but we're actually not at quorum at the moment. I can see in the screen there are only two members of council with their screens on. If there are other members of council who are listening into this presentation, I can turn the screen on. Thank you. Now we have quorum again. Go ahead.
Okay, last question through you, Deputy Mayor. A selfish question. In my ward, I have hydro corridors, and sometimes they are not well maintained. I hear they are owned by Hydro One. Do you have connections into Hydro One that might help us with maintaining and making some really cool spots during those hydro corridors? That's my sort of selfish question through you.
Yeah, I mean, there are things that we work closely, obviously, with Hydro One. And they do provide the supply through the transmission grid to all of our power. And I'd say there's a positive working relationship. Which certainly I work well with the senior leadership and through all of our teams. So that's something that we can bring to their attention and say it was raised at the local level, and they'll hear about it. So we'll keep you posted on that.
Thank you, CEO. Those are all my questions.
And next on the speakers list, and our last person on our speakers list is Councillor Alex Wilson. Take it away, Councillor Alex Wilson.
Thank you, and through you, Deputy Mayor, just one question from me. Just hearing about the need for those homes acting as centers of generation of renewable electricity that are on the edge of the system, and hearing that as part of how we're talking about this decarbonization strategy, there's a role for homeowners in it. Does our system right now have capacity? If I was a homeowner in the Hamilton area, wanted to put solar panels on, be part of the system, we've had reports in Ward 13 of folks being told that the distribution system can't handle it. There's not enough ability in the system to support that. So if that is the case, could you talk a little bit more about what some of those challenges are? I completely agree with the overarching direction we want to go. We want to have opportunities for people to be a part of that transition. Are we ready for them right now? And if not, what steps are we going to take to get there?
Yeah, that's a good question. So with respect to, I'll start with electric vehicles. You're asking about solar panels, but electric vehicles, we have to do and we have done initial stress tests on the system in terms of the stress that level 2 charging in the home, because typically a mini pad transformer services 8 to 12 homes. So the green box in the subdivision, it's got 8 to 12 services on it. If you have 3 or 4 of those homes charging at level 2, you can stress the transformer. So we have to right size all the transformers. They range from 75 kVA to 200 kVA. We've got to make sure there's enough capacity at the transformer level. But we can also do it through intelligence. So there is advanced meter technology that can monitor and sense when the homes are charging, and it can optimize and cycle charging in the home. So that type of intelligence can take, and it can do the same thing with solar arrays. It can monitor the usage and say, okay, this home is using this much power, I'm going to balance it off. And so the transformer doesn't see as much load, but you need the intelligence to be able to do that. The other thing that we can do is rate design. So recently we piloted the ultra-low rate design, electropiloted that ultra-low rate design that the ministry has adopted across the province. So that 2-cent overnight rate for low charging, that can take stress off the system too. But in terms of the solar panels, we have to do continue to understand where those congestion points will occur on the grid, and so that includes analytics, data mining, knowing where those pockets of solar panels and EVs are going to happen, so that we can proactively, upgrade our system to enable that. So there's a whole host of things that'll happen. Today, we can connect a lot of them, but I say, if we had a flood of the EV adoption rate is a very steep curve, or the solar adoption rate is a very steep curve, we're going to have some challenges.
Thanks. Councillor Wilson?
Thank you. What I heard was we could be ready, but different parts of the grid are at different stages of readiness, and there are things we can do to overcome that. But I think there's an implicit answer in that, which is saying things like an electric car sharing program where there's a predictable load is easier to bring online than every individual household doing this on their own. Strategies to group demand into predictable ways at predictable scales can help us surmount that technology challenge. So I think that's also really interesting, just as we're having conversations about Commune Auto and other programs that already exist in the city, just how we can hear that technological limitation and think about what that means in other settings that we're making decisions. So thank you for that. Those are my questions.
Thank you.
Thank you. That brings us to the end of our presentation. So could I have a mover and a seconder to receive that presentation? Councillor McMeekin, first off the draw, seconded by Councillor Kassar, and we'll have an electronic vote on receiving the presentation. Councillor McMeekin's in favor. Anyone else wants to indicate? Mayor Horvath's in favor. And that carries 11-0. Thank you very much. And that brings us to item number 6 on our agenda, and that is the shareholder resolutions, the audited consolidated financial statements, etc., that you see under 6.1. May I please have a mover and a seconder to put the shareholder resolutions on the floor? Moved by Councillor Huang, seconded by Councillor Kassar. Are there any discussions on the resolutions themselves? Checking the speakers list, doing an eyeball check. Seeing no one, we can have that vote. Councillor McMeekin is in favor. Mayor Horvath's in favor. For those watching wondering why I'm saying certain people's names out loud, Councillor Huang is in favor. Just in case the electronic system isn't keeping up, we're also taking these votes visually as well, so I'm just recording those for the record. And that also carried 11-0. And we're on to our final item, everyone, adjournment. And looking around the room for those who'd like to adjourn, Councillor Taddison moved it, and seconded by Councillor Huang. We'll also have that electronic vote for adjournment. You can. Hold on. Councillor Huang would like to speak on the adjournment. Councillor Huang?
Yes, I'd like to thank CEO Brian Benson and CFO Danielle for being here today and actually speaking to us. I'd also like to thank both CEO Jeffrey Cowan and Chairman of the Board Lori Tugman for being here in council chambers and spending their time with us today. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Huang, and we can now vote on the adjournment. Councillor Jackson and Councillor McMeekin are in favor of adjourning. Councillor Taddison is also in favor of adjourning. In an unsurprising result, we will be adjourned with a vote of 11-0. Enjoy your afternoon, everyone. Thank you.